the one thing that tends to slip people's mind is energy. And the question is like, wherever you are you having that good energy? Because if you have good energy there, then you could find ways to make more money. You can find ways to carve out more time. But if you're in a space where your surroundings are not energizing you, but they're enervating, like they're draining energy from you, you're just going to slowly lose money and time anyway. My advice for people has always been like, put yourself in a position where you're getting the best kind of energy and you'll be able to maximize time and money.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the Canadian Private Lenders Podcast, a show covering the private lending industry, the mortgage broker space, and the Canadian economy. Your hosts are Neal Andreino and Ryan MacNeil. Enjoy.
All right, everybody, welcome back. It's episode 82 of the Canadian Private Lenders Podcast with your hosts, Ryan and Neal. Neal, how you making out, buddy?
Not too bad. It's a little rainy out here today.
Yeah, the rain is coming down in Halifax after getting spoiled for a few days, but apparently not coming down where our guest is today in Toronto. We're joined by Mr. Jonathan Lee, the founder and principal lawyer at AG Truett. AG Truett focuses on providing legal services to the participants in the asset management industry. Jonathan has over a decade of experience at some prestigious Bay Street law firms and has represented many mixed mortgage investment corporations like Keystone Capital, mutual fund trusts, ETFs, hedge funds, pooled funds, and real estate and fund formation and ongoing securities obligations related to it as well. John, welcome to the show today, buddy.
Ryan, Neal, thank you guys for having me. Happy to be here.
Let's talk a bit about your background before we jump into some thoughts around fund formation in the real estate space. So really would love to hear, John, about how you dove into the securities law space, and if you want to kind of touch on maybe your education and why you chose to specialize in asset management law.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. So just quick rundown on my education. So I did a BA in political studies at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. And following that, I completed a master's in public policy and administration at what was formerly known as Ryerson University. And after that, I started law school at Osgoode Hall. And so after my first year of law school, I thought, what the heck? Why not add another piece of paper, add another degree? So I wrote the GMAT and I got into the combined law and business program that's offered jointly by Osgoode and the Schulich School of Business at York University. After all that school, I got an articling position at one of the so-called seven sister law firms in Toronto. So if you're not familiar with the concept, articling is kind of like internship or residency period where someone trains to be a lawyer before they're called to the bar. And typically at these top law firms, the firms tend to hire back their articling students at a pretty successful rate. And within the corporate group of the firm that I was at, there was a subgroup called the managed assets practice area. And they were looking for a junior associate. And to me at that time, law was the law, the practice areas, they all seemed pretty similar to me because paper was paper and words were words. And so I didn't really know enough about any niche practice area, but I was pragmatic. And after speaking to a number of people, I was convinced that this was an area that it would involve a very steep learning curve, which is why it tended to repel junior lawyers. But once you got past that curve, the sky was the limit in terms of professional opportunities. And that's held to be true because if you look around, there really aren't that many asset management lawyers in Canada. And so I figured if I dug down deep, stayed the course with this industry, I'd have a chance to develop a niche skill that would be in demand.
Curious, John, why you chose to leave the Bay Street dream. I know you worked for several prominent firms there, but I guess how long has it been since AG Truett started? 2 years? Just over 2 years?
Yeah, just over 2 years. I'm about 2.5 years in now.
Okay, awesome. We love to hear that. We're about 2 years into our business as well. It's certainly exciting, and I know we've chatted on this before, but what's your experience been like being out on your own and trading in your suit for your nice quarter zip there?
Yeah, right. So, in my 11 years of practice, I worked at large tier one law firms. I've had in-house experience. I even had a short stint at a mid-sized firm too. And the one thing that I never tried doing was hanging up my own shingle. It's something I never thought I would do. But near the tail end of my time on Bay Street, I was just so burnt out, just tired all the time, kind of miserable. Being was a tough place to be. Like I still remember just being on Zoom calls, at dinner time with like 70 people, like 70 little screens all over your monitor. And my wife is downstairs, like trying to finish preparing dinner for the dinner table. And my kids are downstairs chasing each other with scissors. And I just thought to myself, I don't know how long I can keep this up. At the core, when I was on Bay Street, I think I still enjoyed the practice of law, right? Especially in the asset management industry. I developed the skill. I was happy with it. And I do subscribe to the philosophy of if you get quite good at something, you tend to like it, right? But I just wasn't having a lot of fun practicing when I was on Bay Street. And so the question was, could my experience be a little different if I changed environments? Well, I mean, I've changed environments before. I've done big law, I've done mid law, I've done in-house law, and none of them were really my cup of tea. So I really had to do a personal inventory. I developed these hard skills on Bay Street, but I wasn't yet in a place where I could combine those hard skills with my soft skills of connecting with people, with cultivating relationships, and coupling that with some of my natural leanings towards creativity. I wasn't content being the nerd in the corner of the office, just grinding out a document. And I mean, don't get me wrong, that's a very important part of the job, but I wanted more. I wanted to be part of the business and client development aspect of things and really put my personal stamp on my career. And so I learned that through the course of my life, that if you want something more often than not, you can't wait around for someone to give it to you. You need to go and get it yourself, right? And so upon that realization, it just dawned on me that I may very well flourish if I became an entrepreneur, if I started my own firm. You know, with that realization, the firm that I was at, we parted ways fairly quickly and hung up my own shingle within a few weeks. So the ride of setting up my own shop it's been wild. It's been full of fearful, exciting, and exhilarating moments. Like I left Bay Street with no clients, which kind of makes sense because, you know, when you're at the big shop, the clients were not my own. They were the firm's, right? And so I left without much of a Rolodex. So in the first 6 to 8 months, starting my shop, I was purely focused on building out a book of business. And it took a lot of effort. Like I had like 40 to 60 coffee meetings with people in my network each month. And I don't even drink coffee. So it was very painful, you know, just being hopped up on sugar and caffeine for like almost 200 days straight. But, you know, in the grand scheme of things, 6 to 8 months is not a very long time. So I'm very fortunate to have built out my desk within that time frame. But yeah, I'm 2.5 years out. I have one associate lawyer who works with me. I have a part-time securities law clerk and just a strong list of subcontractors. So between the three of us and some of my external contacts, AG Truett, the little shop that could, we're able to offer a pretty comprehensive securities law experience for those looking to form an investment vehicle and raise capital, and also for securities registrants. So I represent dealers, advisors, and investment fund managers too. Not sure if I'm like overselling ourselves by saying this, but like I believe we're the only asset management boutique in the country, and we often successfully compete for business against the larger firms on Bay Street. And, you know, we're happy to get into this a bit more. My firm does a lot of fund formation. We form limited partnerships, we form mutual fund trusts, mortgage investment entities, as you're aware of, and we also do public and private securities work. We're asset agnostic, so that means we have experience working with a variety of vehicles that have very diverse investment strategies. So real estate developers, private lenders, private equity, hedge funds, ETFs, public mutual funds. We've got a depth of experience across the asset management spectrum.
So having made that change, do you feel like you found what you were looking for in making that? Like I know you had that moment when the family's going, they're busy, you're upstairs, you're in a giant Zoom call, you're like, I need to make this change. I respect that you took the action to do it because I think a lot of people feel that and do nothing about it.
Yep.
At this point now, like, I mean, it sounds like the first year was definitely a grind. Is it starting to fall into place to how you kind of hoped and imagined and what you were looking for when you wanted to make that change or made that change?
Yeah, totally. Just kind of speaking back to that feeling that I was experiencing while I was on that 70-person Zoom call. If I can go back during that time, it just felt like I was being squeezed, right? On all sides. You have the immense work pressure, you have the family pressure, and I was probably also not working out regularly during that time. And so my health was probably, I think now that I think back about it, it was probably in shambles at that time too. And I just knew that, not to get too morbid about it, but at that time I was in my mid 30s and I was thinking, men especially don't seem to live as long as women. Like in Canada, our life expectancy is like 70 something, right? And I was thinking, I'm halfway through. I'm at halftime, if I can say that, in my life. I'm in a situation that is just not really conducive to my happiness. It's not conducive to my flourishing. I'm not content with where I am. And so I knew that, and I say this to a lot of junior lawyers too. You want to be in a place where if you're in the office and you're looking down the hall and you're looking at the other people who work around you, if you could look at those people and say, I want to be like them, then you're in the right place. But if you're looking down the hall and you're seeing people who are just doing things that you don't want to do, and they're living a life that you don't want to live, you got to get out of there. Right. And so at that point, I was just thinking it's riskier for me to stay there than it is for me to go out there on my own. Like, I've spoken to so many people about this, right? And people who've been in similar positions as me, and like they've said the same thing to me, like, John, it's very hard for me to go out on my own. I have a stable career here. I have a stable income. And my response has always been like, if you're working for someone, it's actually kind of risky because you have one stream of income. Your career is kind of contingent upon whether or not that direct manager of yours actually likes you. So that's risky too. So the whole risk assessment thing is the idea that having like a more stable job is less risky than going out on your own, I think is a bit of a misnomer. I don't think that's necessarily true. And so I got to a point where I was just like, you know what, I have to get out of here. And I'm really happy that I did. And now it was terrifying because I have a mortgage. I have 2 young kids. My
How's your wife
doesn't
feel
work
about it?
outside the home. Yeah. So this is the thing. If I had a more risk averse wife, I don't know if I would have done it. So I still remember we were watching a Raptors game. It was the Raptors versus Bucks. And I was just telling her, I was just like, listen, I can't stay here. I need to just go and do my own thing. And she was just like, you know what? If you feel strongly about this, I trust you. I think you'll do well. We should give it a shot. And the one thing that was encouraging for me when we were talking was just getting to that point of reminding ourselves, hey, listen, this doesn't work out. Like, you could always go back. And so I told myself, listen, I'm going to give myself 1 year. And within that 1 year, if I have 0 clients, if I fail so miserably that I make like $0 in the whole year, then that'll be a pretty clear sign that I should probably go back. Right. But I thought about it some more. I was just like, I would have to crap the bed so badly in order to have zero clients. I have no work. So why not give it a shot? And worst case scenario, I'll pull out a HELOC or something to feed my family. But, even then that would be so painful.
Yeah, John, I can relate very closely to your situation there, not only with your wife and your young kids, but also having, you talked about the risk of staying where you're unhappy and you're really not in control, right? And if that manager doesn't like you or if the company needs to downsize, you have major risks there. You have zero control. But beyond that, knowing what you know and being an expert where you are, chances are, if you kind of put that together with a little bit of business development and sell what you can do, you can make it, right? And even if you don't shoot to the moon in your first year, you're getting enough money to put food on the table, and then you just keep building it, right? So very, very cool.
And the truth is, and I kind of wanted to speak to this point for anyone who's feeling stuck where they are. Folks tend to think about, I have time and I have money and where I am, regardless of what that is. But the one thing that tends to slip people's mind is energy. And the question is, like, wherever you are you having that good energy? Because if you have good energy there, then you could find ways to make more money. You can find ways to carve out more time. But if you're in a space where your surroundings are not energizing you, but they're enervating, like they're draining energy from you, you're just going to slowly lose money and time anyway. My advice for people has always been, try to put yourself in a position where you're getting the best kind of energy, and you'll be able to maximize time and money.
Very well said.
I want to just double down on that for a second. I know we have a bunch of other questions, but I think for people listening, this is something that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Double down on that energy concept a little bit. Would you say that's in everything, like in your workplace, your home, where you live? Because again, I think you're resonating with me on that. I don't necessarily have a kid running around with scissors yet, but anyways, what all feeds into that, I guess, is the thing. I guess you're talking mostly about workplace, but do you consider that with everything in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everything is connected anyway. And so I'll move back a few years. When I was an in-house lawyer, I moved in-house shortly after I had my first son, because the Kool-Aid at that time was, once you have kids, you don't have the energy for private practice anymore. So you should just go in-house and you should work less hours, and therefore you'll have more capacity for all the other demands in your life, right? But when I was in-house, a fairly negative experience. It wasn't the best environment for me. And so what I found was that even though I was working less when I was in-house, I was coming away with less energy. Like, I was coming home miserable. I was coming home kind of angry, just really on edge all the time. And that made me not a great husband, not a great father, not a great friend, not a great anything, really. But one thing that I've noticed, the difference between me being an in-house lawyer to me still being in private practice as an entrepreneur now, is I have way better energy now. Like, I'm just way busier. I'm a million times busier. I have running the practices take up a lot of time, but I'm approaching every part of my life with a lot more gusto. That good energy feeds into everything else. Like if I'm feeling energized at work, then I'll feel motivated. I'll feel motivated to go to the gym. I'll feel motivated to put forward my best self, like in every other part of my life, including my family and with my friends and my wider community too.
Last question I want to ask you, you mentioned and you touched on this really quickly, was time. What's your sentiment on people feeling like they have time? Because I feel that right now. I'm 29, turning 30. All my friends are in the same boat. And some of them I chat with, and I know we grew up and they had lofty aspirations or they dreamed of having their own business. And a lot of them, when I talk to them about it, they feel that there's a lot of time. Like they're like, I'm still young in my career. Having done this, having done it when you did it, what's your mindset around time and availability to do these things?
I think we all need to approach life with a little bit more urgency. I'm not trying to put us all on a hamster wheel and say, you got to just move at like 200 miles an hour all the time. But I do think that it's so easy to fall into malaise and to think that you do have time and to move at a snail's pace, right? I don't think we have that much time. Like when I look at people, I remember talking to this one guy and he was saying that he didn't want to leave his comfortable government job because he had a pension, and he made the calculations and he said, it's just too risky to go out and do his own thing because he expects to live to 90. And I almost fell out of my chair when I heard that. How incredibly presumptuous of you to think that you're going to live to 90. I mean, again, not to be too morbid, I see people dying between 40 to 70 all the time. How could you ever crystal ball the idea that you have until 90? No way. So for me, I just don't like to, I don't like to presume on tomorrow. We've been given time today and we really just need to maximize it. And so one of the things, especially for entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs, is that for a lot of would-be entrepreneurs, I think what people need to hear is that speed and velocity are your friends. Like you don't have to get it right perfectly and you don't have to fully SWOT analyze everything to a T. That might lead to paralysis, right? If you have a great idea, go for it. This is the thing. If you have a great idea, and you go to the middle of Dundas Square or whatever it's called these days, and then you yell out your idea, nobody would steal it. And they wouldn't do it because execution is something that not a lot of people do. So what I tell a lot of would-be founders and entrepreneurs is if you have a great idea, if you have a good business model, if you have a good business plan, just try it. Like what's the worst thing that can happen, right? Go for it and see where it goes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I had an old company I worked at. The motto was speed over perfection, and I try to live by that. And I feel that's played a lot of positives in my life. So, John, let's get into the meat of it here. So, our guests really are likely going to want to hear about fund formation. So, and specifically with MICs and MFTs. So, I know this is a very broad question, but I know you'll give us a perfectly nice little concise answer here. But can you kind of walk us through the key steps in terms of a fund formation in the real estate space?
First, I think we got to just start with the definition of a fund, which is colloquially speaking, it's an investment vehicle that pools money from investors in order to invest in underlying assets, right? And so the first question for any would-be fund manager is what kind of structure do you want to use? And the structure that you use is largely dependent on your investment strategy. So a fund can take a variety of forms, but you'll usually see them in the form of a limited partnership or a trust. All right. And so a limited partnership it's a very useful vehicle for investors who want to have a very minimal to no role in the management of the fund and thus limited liability. It's a flow through vehicle. So the profit generated by the limited partnership isn't taxed at the partnership level, right? It's because a partnership is not a legal person. It's taxed in the laps of the investors' ordinary income. And so compared to a corporation, a limited partnership is a much more effective investment vehicle for a capital raiser. Now, a mutual fund trust, it's also a flow through vehicle. And so it's used primarily for the purpose of onboarding registered monies. So if you're an investor and you can't use your RRSPs to invest in a limited partnership vehicle, you can't do that, but you can do that in a mutual fund trust. So it's a very handy vehicle for anyone looking to raise capital since they can use the MFT to tap into investor monies that are tied up in registered accounts. And so obviously that begs the question of why would anyone ever use a limited partnership? The mutual fund trust can be used, right? It just seems like a more attractive vehicle for investors. Well, the short answer is that the trust has to meet a number of conditions in order to qualify as a mutual fund trust, right? One of which includes a requirement of having 150 unit holders, 150 investors, which for a number of issuers is a fairly onerous and it's a gatekeeping mechanism, really. So now a mortgage investment corporation, a MIC, is neither a partnership or a trust. It's a corporation, but it's a special kind of corporation, right? MICs were They were developed back in the 70s by the federal government for two purposes. One of which was to encourage private investment in the residential mortgage market, but two, also to give Canadians broader access to mortgage financing as an alternative to the big banks. So there's a regulatory framework to a MIC similar to a mutual fund trust. It's subject to a number of conditions at the investor level. So for example, the MIC has to have at least 20 shareholders, which is not as bad as the mutual fund trust. And there are restrictions or conditions really at the investment level. So for example, 50% of the assets in a MIC have to be held in residential mortgages, right? And so once you're settled on the investment structure, which is dependent on your investment strategy a lot, you enter the world of securities laws, because what you're selling to investors are securities. You're selling these instruments, these pieces of paper, or should I say in the digital world now, ledgers, really. These things, they identify ownership of a unit of the investment vehicle. Once you determine the structure, you gotta think, okay, I have to deal with two main pillars of securities laws now. And now the first pillar is the prospectus requirement, and the second pillar is registration. So the prospectus requirement, so anyone looking to sell securities in Canada needs to comply with the prospectus requirement. Now, prospectus is a disclosure document that tells you about the guts of the fund, right? So anything from the history of the fund manager to the redemption mechanics, the fund to the investment strategy, the investment objective, and so on. And so for anyone looking to sell to the public, like you have to issue a prospectus. Now that's very onerous. It's very difficult. And the truth of the matter is that it doesn't happen that often. We don't have a lot of IPOs. We just don't. And so one of the issues that law firms are dealing with is that a lot of their junior lawyers don't have IPO experience because we don't IPO that often, right? And so a large number of issuers don't go down the public route. They go down the private route. And so there are what we call prospectus exemptions. These are mechanisms within the legal world that you can rely on, really levers that you can pull, where you don't have to issue a full-blown prospectus. You can rely on an exemption. But what this does is narrows down the world of investors that you can present the investment opportunity to, right? And so one of the most common prospectus exemptions would be the accredited investor exemption. So, according to this prospectus exemption, you don't even necessarily need to have a disclosure document to provide to investors, although you probably still want to have one from a marketing perspective. What it allows you to do is it allows you to raise capital among a select group of investors. And these are folks who are higher net worth. They have a certain level of income. They have a certain level of net assets. And so when you think about it this way, securities laws is reflective in a bit of an inverse relationship between investor protection and investor sophistication. So the less sophisticated investor is, the more protections they need, the more disclosure that they need. The more sophisticated they are, the less protections they need, the less disclosure they might need, right? The disclosure requirement is there, right? At the end of the day, if you're issuing to securities to those who are very sophisticated, you have an opportunity to rely on one of these prospectus exemptions.
I'm just trying to simplify it a little bit because I know some people will follow a lot of it, some won't. From your experience, I was going to ask, how do you think people make the decision between MIC and MFT? Like at a high level, very quickly, from like what you're seeing, what's the difference maybe in the product offering, or is it the objective on the investor? What type of investor they're going after that's making the decision?
An MFT, so a mortgage investment trust actually is closer to an MFT. And so it actually allows you to bring on those 150 unit holders. I believe there's also they have more flexibility in the types of the lending profile. So the investment strategy is a little different from an MFT in a MIC. There's more opportunity for a mortgage investment trust to do commercial mortgages, as opposed to the MIC that's more centered around residential mortgages.
Yeah. So typically it's when people are going after commercial lending that they'll go down the trust path versus doing a MIC, which to your point is much more residential.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
In the years like past, since COVID, I feel like, and you can definitely comment on this better, that there's been a ton of growth within the space. Are you seeing that? Like, has there been a ton of formation? Was it pre-COVID, it was already taking place, or did things happen post-COVID where we all feel like there was a ton more capital available in the marketplace, money was a little cheaper, people were a little more free with it? What have you seen there?
When COVID first hit, it caused a lot of volatility in the public markets. On top of that, to prop up the economy, the Bank of Canada slashed interest rates too. So there's uncertainty in the public markets. There's low yields in traditional fixed income products like government bonds, GICs. So yeah, investor interest in alternative assets spiked. So both institutional and retail investors are looking a lot more heavily into real estate, private equity, private credit, and even crypto really for diversification purposes. MICs were considered partial hedging instruments too, because they offered steady and decent distributions in an environment where I would say that the traditional fixed income products were yielding next to nothing. So the interest in private assets has continued to carry over post-COVID. One example would be like the proliferation of what we call access funds, which are essentially these special purpose vehicles formed to permit more retail-ish investors to, access investments that were normally only available to institutional investors. So yeah, we're definitely seeing that.
I would say we're necessarily in COVID now, where we're getting into another volatile marketplace with global politics and a bunch of other pieces. Would you say that you think you'll see a return to this demand for like a more secure fixed income type product versus maybe we'll say high growth opportunities that were taking place, I'll say 2021, 2022?
There are a lot of smarter people who are actually experts on Canadian politics and the economy and the intersection of the two. But so I'm a little hesitant to make predictions, but what I would say is that at least based on my observation on the ground, that a lot of people are aware of the decline in their own purchasing power. They're aware of the steady erosion of their assets. They're being priced out of the housing market. And more people are not just side hustling, but they're actively looking for opportunities outside of their standard 9-to-5 job. They want to swing for the fences. They want to take risks. They want to buy businesses that are being sold by retiring boomers. They're concerned that the same career route that they took is just not really yielding the return that they expected. So while I have my concerns about the economy, I'm also cautiously optimistic that our current challenges will hopefully be met with some common sense by the government and with resilience and creativity from all Canadians. And if so, perhaps we'll see a rise in entrepreneurialism and risk taking, which should result in a net benefit to us all.
Yeah, that'd be good. It feels like nowadays politics operate a little quicker than they did in the past. I feel like in the past, they didn't know what was going to happen. They'd put whatever new policy or change the rules in some capacity, and then they'd watch the next couple of years as the economy potentially could crumble. Nowadays, it seems like it's like, okay, we did this, it's not working, or we have clear projections where things are going. We have a lot of data that we can work with. They make the change to try and keep it moving. Like that's how it feels. Statistics right now, especially in the real estate world, don't look super sexy. But to your point, I'm optimistic that we kind of continue this drive, and it seems like there's a shift to your point of old to young. I don't know if you're seeing that, if you're involved in a lot of that, but are you seeing that a bit?
I'm seeing it quite a bit. I work with a lot of ex-I bankers who've gone out on their own. And so M&A activity is a little slow right now, but it's not because there aren't opportunities. I think there are a lot of healthy small to mid-sized businesses. We're talking like 2 to 5 million EBITDA that are being on the market. And these are run by boomers whose kids do not want to take over the businesses, right? And so there's going to be a massive transition that's going to be happening over the next couple of years. And these are really kind of interesting businesses that there are things that you would never think of in terms of profitability, right? I came across one opportunity where this guy was just, all he does is sell water to office buildings, and he weathered COVID. And he's got a healthy business doing that, right? I see other things where motor coach businesses that are doing very well right now too. Like, and if you have a fleet of 50 to 70 vans or motor coach vehicles, you could do quite well with that. There's senior citizens who want to take bus tours. There's hockey teams that need to drive around to their various games. There's a lot of opportunities. I'm seeing a lot of a variety of businesses out there, and more interest, I think, from the younger generation to have something tangible of their own, right? And take on a bit less of a traditional route. I'm a millennial, right? And so we graduated in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. And so there are a lot of folks in my cohort that would be maybe a bit more conservative and seeking the safer route. But I'm seeing more and more an uptick in folks who are just looking to break out of that mentality and do something different.
Is there an opportunity for you as in the legal side? Like, can you buy a book of business, or can you buy out a firm and merge? Is that something that's feasible, or is it more like getting associates to come with you? What's that look like?
I'm leaning more towards the latter. So right now I have one associate. In terms of buying a book of business, I'm just not too aware of folks who are outside of big law that practice in the same area that I do. The main competitor swallowed up by a large Bay Street firm. And so right now my strategy is really to see if I can grow organically, and fairly happy being a small firm right now, and thoughts of scaling could come and go. But right now we're pretty content being a pretty small shop.
Before we pivot into some more of your maybe personal interests here, John, you talked before we came on about, an uptick and you're seeing some development stuff in the United States. Is there any other kind of trends in asset management law that you want to share with us?
So we mentioned a little briefly before I came on that U.S. real estate still seems to be a pretty hot commodity. There's a lot of development happening in the Sun Belt region, down in South Carolina, down in Atlanta, down in parts of Texas as well too. And so that seems to be an attractive asset class for Canadians to invest in. I think another interesting asset might be crypto. I'm a little hesitant to talk any more about it, but it's a volatile asset. It's definitely an interesting one. Canadian real estate, Neal, you touched on this a little bit. It's a little tough right now, but to the extent that if immigration continues at a decent clip, I think one of the interesting strategies I've come across would be condos. Now, condos are really, for a number of folks, not a great investment opportunity. I have wondered whether or not it would make sense as an investment strategy to acquire condos right now, since there's no more development happening in the condo space, and to just wait 5, 6, 7 years. And once that hockey stick, on the graph happens, to sell. And so the numbers are still not making sense to me yet. I've input them into a ChatGPT and they still don't make sense. The maintenance fees are just still too insane. So I'm not sure right now, but I'm keeping my eyes open.
Funny you mentioned that, John. We've been talking about the same thing recently. And although you're absolutely right, the numbers still don't make sense. They're much closer than they were even 6, 12 months ago, right? So it feels like there could be an opportunity there. But before we run out of time, there's a couple of things I want to touch on here. So on top of founding your own law firm in the last couple of years, you also recently became a children's author with your publication of Jimmy's Boba. And I got this book for my kids, fantastic book, not only because it has the bubble tea, which my kids absolutely love, but I'd say more importantly, it gives an overview of entrepreneurship and starting your business from A to Z from a children's perspective, which is so cool. Fantastic book. You can pick it up on Amazon. I think, John, feel free to fill us in where you can get the book. But how does a securities lawyer cross over into the world of kids' books?
Thank you so much, Ryan, for highlighting Jimmy's Boba. And you can get it actually at Indigo. I haven't put it up on Amazon yet because they take a massive cut, but I'm working on it. So my views on the economy are connected to why I wrote Jimmy's Boba, which is a book that teaches kids about entrepreneurialism, and it uses a bubble tea shop as a learning vehicle. So as I mentioned earlier, I have 2 boys, 6 and 4, always on the hunt for good books for them to read, like the kind of books that catch my eye. They tend to have an interesting concept, colorful pictures, and an educational component, right? And so my kids love that series where they pit one animal against each other, like gorilla versus leopard, or like snake versus Komodo dragon. Like, who would win? And the book goes through interesting facts about each creature. Like, this one has teeth and venom, and the other one has fangs and venom, and it ends off with this like hypothetical fight between the two. But books that are both interesting and educational, those are the ones that really catch my eye. But what I noticed was, while I was walking through bookstores and libraries, is that while there are a lot of books on history, children's books on history, animals, science, music, whatever, there are little to none about business. And I believe the concepts of financial literacy, budgeting, money management, entrepreneurship, these are very important concepts that kids should be exposed to at an early age, so that they have an idea of not just eventually working to make $1, but how to make $1 work for them, right? So my co-author, Kevin Feng, and I, we got started on developing a story about a kid named Jimmy. He sets up a bubble tea shop, and the story uses bubble tea, his process of setting up that shop, as a vehicle for teaching kids about the basics of starting a business. So the story follows Jimmy as he generates an idea with the help of his family. He learns to capitalize on that idea. He assesses supply and demand, puts together a business plan, learns about debt financing, goes through a small lease transaction, learns how to market, comes to the realization that he needs to leverage employees. And so we also put a worksheet at the back of the book where parents and kids can put into practice the concepts taught at the front end of the book. And we've been doing book tours. We've been going to schools and doing book readings, having an opportunity to expose kids to the basic principles of building a business.
Yeah, super cool.
Is there a couple pages on like mix and MFTs?
Yeah. Well, maybe for book number 2, Jimmy sets up an MFC.
Yes. Teach him young.
You gotta get 20 of your classmates each to put up 10 grand.
Jimmy's Mick.
Jimmy
I
relies
love
on the
it.
accredited investor exemption.
Yeah. Unreal. We can go all night here. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, John, just a couple more before we wrap up here. But, we've had some great conversations, not only on your business, but on entrepreneurship and on life in general. What do you love most about your job and your industry?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the industry itself, approaching securities law is very daunting. And I know this because as a wide-eyed junior lawyer in my youth, in the first few years of learning the craft, it was a very stressful time because of the complexity of the material. And so one of the things that I love about what I do at this point is that I get to be a trusted guide, a Sherpa of some sort. I get to be involved in helping navigate my clients through the securities law maze. And so it doesn't matter whether or not you're a first-time capital raiser or a seasoned investor. There's always new issues that pop up. To me, it's intellectually gratifying to wrestle through those questions. Not to speak for everybody, but a lot of lawyers actually feel the same way, that to a certain extent, they would even be happy to practice for free just because they like to nerd out on fact gathering and issue resolution. In terms of my specific job as a founder of a small law firm, I find that I've become a connector of some sort. That's a status that I never had as a Bay Street lawyer. As an ex-Bay Street lawyer, I find that most of my clients are also ex-Bay Street. They're jailbreakers from high banking, high finance, private equity, and they've taken the expertise that they developed at the big shops and they start their own thing. And so one of the more gratifying experiences is that I'm not just a trusted lawyer anymore. My clients treat me as a trusted, comprehensive advisor. And so if you need me to do the legal work, by all means, I'm your guy. But if you have an issue that's outside of my wheelhouse, I'll still help you solve it by connecting you to the right people. And then that it's a very gratifying experience. And beyond that, I just like working for myself. I like the flexibility. Like I mentioned before, with my two young boys, they're not getting any younger and neither am I. And so having that ability to just work for myself and set my own hours is a huge benefit in this season of life.
Got one more, Neal, before we hit him with the bonus?
Yeah, so the final thing, what does the future hold for you? Obviously, there's a second book, but you mentioned too earlier, growing the firm, add some associates. What else is on the go?
So this is going to sound very arbitrary, but I'm buying into a restaurant in Chinatown in Toronto.
Oh, let's
And
go.
so-
That's awesome.
So this is a tea and noodle shop. We're still just working out the specifics. So maybe I'll announce it at another time. But, this is my venture into private equity in a sense. And so I have a pretty good network when it comes to the restaurant industry. And so with their help, I'm feeling confident that we can take the restaurant that's currently operating well, but it could do better and it can turn it around.
Cool.
Sweet. We're going to have to go there when we come in.
I was just going to say, yeah. What's
Absolutely.
the timeline, John? Do you figure until it would launch?
I think we'll close on my involvement like in the next month or so that I could be formally helping take the reins. I think fresh relaunch will probably happen sometime in the fall. So once you guys make your way back to central Canada, I'll take you guys for a bowl of noodles.
Love
Sweet.
it. Love it. Amazing. All right, John, to wrap up, we always hit our guests with a bonus question, okay? And the bonus question, it typically either relates to the Toronto Maple Leafs, if I'm asking the question, or to pizza, one of the two. So very broad. But one thing, I know you're a diehard Raptors fan, so I want to focus on the Raps today. And I don't think we've had a guest talk about the Raptors in a while. I know it's been a couple down years for the Raps, and they're in a rebuild right now. So I'd love to hear maybe what their position is going into the draft lottery here, if the draft lottery's already happened, where they're going to be picking this year, and give us your kind of quick synopsis on how you would rebuild the team in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I don't think we're in a position to get Cooper Flagg, which is unfortunate because he's projected to be the next LeBron James, of sorts. I think the Raptors have a number of good draft picks due to all the trades that we've made in the past. Aside from that, we have a really strong young core, right? We have obviously around Scotty Barnes, we have RJ Barrett, we have Emmanuel Quickley, we have Grady Dick, and we added Brandon Ingram earlier this season. So when on paper, it looks like a very strong team. And I can't forget Jakob Poeltl, who's a fantastic center for us too. I'm as cautiously optimistic about the Raptors as I am about the economy.
That's awesome, John. Anything else you want to add before we wrap here?
I really appreciate you guys having me on the show. It was a really fun time just being able to bounce back and forth with each other. And hopefully I can come again.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Fantastic conversation. Thank you for sharing your insights. And we appreciate you joining and appreciate everybody listening.
Thanks, John. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening, guys. It's Neal, your co-host and co-founder at Keystone Mortgage Investment Corp. and Director of Investor Relations. I'm also a real estate agent, real estate investor, and business owner.
And your co-host and co-founder of Keystone Mortgage Investment Corporation, Ryan MacNeil. Keystone MIC is licensed under the Mortgage Regulations Act of Nova Scotia, license number 3000844, and through FCMB, license 89280. Keep in mind, the views of this podcast are for informational purposes only and are not financial advice.